I'm Ken Peterson from QuestionPro. I lead our experience function, which includes thinking about customer experience, employee experience, and even patient experience. Today, I have an absolutely wonderful guest joining me, and it will allow me to talk about two of these areas sort of at the same time, which sometimes overlap. And it's titled, today's webinar is titled Meet Me at the Intersection of CX and EX. And joining me today, because he's been so invested in both sides of that equation, is Mike Kelly, from leading CX initiatives in his organization to building tools that enable employees to make it happen. He's the founder of a company called OnUp, which is just a very unique technology platform that defines the workplace for the digital age. He's with a focus on that's user-centric, focus on career development, personalized and on-demand. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'll say, Mike, is there anything else that you'd like to add on to that? Apologies, Mike's audio isn't coming through now.
Ken, you're going to have to make him a co-host.
Mike, can you hear me now?
Ken, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, it's the worst. I'm here to talk about digital experience and I couldn't make my audio go.
Hey, I think in today's day and age, they said if you don't hear at least, I couldn't get my audio unmuted or I was on mute. You're not doing it right. So,
Ken, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everybody.
So, for the benefit of those hearing me for the first time, just a little bit of introduction about myself as well. I have an operations background. I don't have the, I didn't have the social sciences background. I was very much operations research and really focused on the numbers and making sure those happen. And, you know, but the individual that introduced me to Mike, it pulled me into the field I'm in today, which is customer experience. That person, Tim Cunningham, is really now one of the most respected thought leaders in CX. And I'd have to say, he really pulled me into something that appealed to me because the operational side of it. I mean, the things that you're fixing, you know, you're pulling the right levers to adjust the dials, to optimize performance, optimize sales, profit. And one of those levers, and I'm sure my guest will agree with me, is obviously employee experience and the employees and how they manage the customers. And way back in 2006, Tim and I actually wrote an article about the analytical connection between CX and EX. And even today, I usually still hear the, you know, sort of the show me the proof of a connection. So before jumping into the analytical side, though, let's look at the observational side. And Mike, I mean, you started a company based on engagement after your time trying to move the needle in customer experience. So, I mean, what are your observations about the connection?
Okay, so great question. I think this is part of our challenge today. The world is moving so fast and we have so many different words to choose from here. I have learned, I was on a call yesterday and we really spent a lot of time on our operating definition of what the heck are we talking about. So Ken, can we park here for a moment and make sure we're all on the same page? I think it's valuable to talk about what it is and what it is not, and then give an example of that, because I feel like, you know, I've talked about this so much, sometimes I'm just running right by people. And so in my mind, employee experience is the way of the world is that it's user-centric, meaning employee-centric, on-demand, configurable, personalizable, right? All the CX stuff that you taught the world and your colleagues, we're trying to steal and overlay that to the employee experience, because right now it's the opposite of that. So it's a great question, but we've got to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So can you talk a little bit about that too, just to make sure we're all saying the right words, we understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, it's sort of getting back to that argument of show me the proof, where you know we know over the years. I mean, I could show chart after chart of a relationship between CX and either revenue or profit. I mean, that's usually, let's face it, that's the number businesses focus on, is revenue and profit. And we won't take a ton of time pulling into that, but certainly here on the screen we talk about some of the things that we can do, such as cross sell and upsell with CX, things like that. But I think usually where it gets disconnected is that EX part, because I think today employees are seen mostly as a cost center. And how would that change in your view? And sort of like understand that there is a relationship between employee experience and profit, and that's what people seem to miss on that connection.
Yeah, so the measurement products, which you guys are in that business today, do a great job on certain components. And when I go talk to CEOs and CHROs and CIOs and the like, they have a really hard time adding up these. And so there's that great company Gallup has added up a lot of these numbers. I actually think as a value to our group here, I think the cost of this is actually on your balance sheet. We call it return on employee, and it's a simple equation. If you measure your revenue, everybody knows their top line revenue, and everybody knows their cost of the human beings in your business. Therein is your numerator and denominator of this. And is that a proper return on employee investment? So is it a 2.1 multiple, a 3.1 multiple, something greater than that? And in a percentage, that is, in my mind, the expression of your true employee engagement. And when you look at that, it's stark and it is hiding in plain sight. And I've talked to leaders of all shapes and sizes running all kinds of companies, and there's not enough discipline on let's get to the root cause economics of this. That's 70% of your cost. It's a monster return on a 0.5%. So a massive recapture opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, usually where I see it sort of gets tricky is always in the details, of course. And I'm sure your experience shows that as well. When we're trying to connect them all, I mean, when Tim and I wrote that article together, I mean, it was about a big box retailer. I mean, and within that example, I'll be frank, when we first started analyzing it, the connection didn't seem to be there. We thought we had all this data. We had it over a 3-year time period. We had employee satisfaction. We had customer satisfaction. We had all these revenue numbers and all these turnover numbers. And we loaded it all together, and it was just, there was nothing there. But then we had this idea to sort of separate it out. We said, okay, let's look at the big stores. Let's look at the small stores. And suddenly things really started to pop. And, pretty obvious, location size has an impact. If you have a high-paced, fast-paced location, there's a little less emphasis on, say, for example, the customer experience, because your customer experience is trying to get as many people through the store as possible, versus a slower location where things are a little bit easier, a little more laid back. And certainly as we started to, cut these into little segments, it sort of took away that, the variance that you had when you compile them all together. And it seems intuitive in hindsight, hectic locations, the CX sales connection, suddenly things start to collapse when you start to average everything out, and it doesn't seem like there's movement over time. But then, that started the conversation about how do we deliver, whether it's a retail environment, employees spread out across, physical stores, sometimes, I mean, even nowadays, told not to go into other sections for distancing purposes, and then, across all branches. And then all the way to, even in my world now, I mean, I've worked with organizations that are spread out across 80 countries. There's very little chance to work one-on-one and together, and even more so in this world where none of us are reporting to an office on a regular basis. We have some guys that check servers.
So let me learn from what you just said, because I heard you, Ken, just describe a marketplace. There's a physical footprint. My argument in the world and at work is that location is certainly less relevant and I'm going to challenge this group, it is irrelevant and maybe not available to you as you think about your staff and your employees because of global pandemic. And so you have to take that off your strategic board. At least consider location certainty is not an option for me. And if we look at the principles and the precedent that you CX people have set for us, turns out that's not what mattered. It turns out personalization of the experience is what matters. And the same is true for work, because work is part of the world. And so that's where we're trying to learn from our CX friends like you and QuestionPro of, boy, let me steal that lesson and bring it in to my staff, because my argument is your company is not actually a company, it's a marketplace. And what your customers want to buy, your customers, your employee, what they want to buy from you is self-fulfillment, growth, and opportunity. And as friction-filled as their journey is, the harder it is for them to do that, the quicker they'll leave you. It's the same idea. Department stores lost because they refused to move towards the end user. So if you want to suffer that same fate, don't move towards your employee. How about that for a stark outlook, Ken?
That is a stark outlook. I think one time we were talking and you said the employee engagement right now is like the shopping malls of the early 2000s.
It's Macy's. No offense, Macy's. No offense, Sears. But it's what's happening in department store. It was a business fixated on location and time of when they could do it, and did not soon enough move towards the consumer who wanted to shop whenever, wherever they want, in store or online. But you've got to have loyalty, you've got to have security, you've got to have alerts. Same thing in EX. I've got to be able to write my own plans. I've got to be able to accomplish my own goals. I want you to know my interest. I'm a human being. Give me coaching. The whole staff, not just top leaders. That's the game we're playing right now. Super interesting.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, to me, what's interesting about what you said, it's sort of a reverse transaction. I mean, we're used to, in our space for CX, the customer is bringing cash in hand and purchasing something they feel a fair value for that cash. Sometimes they don't feel it's a fair value, but, there's basically that agreement between the customer and that retailer or whoever you're buying from, that you're going to exchange this much monetary value for this product. But with employee experience, it's sort of the reverse. Describe that a little bit more for me.
I love it. I love listening to you, Ken. So these insights we can steal because the exchange of value at work are those two denominators, right? I'm paying employee to produce output. And some people say, oh, I'm not in sales. Yes, you are. You're either directly supporting somebody who's in sales or you're in sales yourself. We all need output. So if company can break even on your salary, then you're probably not going to be there very long. We need a 2 or 3 times minimum return on your cost to the business. That sounds harsh, but it is reality. And so together then we can say the exchange of value is here. I'm going to produce output, but what I want from you, company, is growth, skills development, incentives, rewards, praise, promotions, relationships, those marketplace components. And in that we can trade, because really talented people, and let's be honest, kind of just talented people, regular old people, you can attach yourselves to lots of structures right now to do your best work, not necessarily a corporation. So in that, I see the corporation as the department store of, boy, we better get our act together here, because really good people can leave because they can, so they do if they must. That's a Tim Kynaham truism. And yes. So, that's the deal. And companies are frustrated by that of, oh, there's no more loyalty. I say, that is a bunch of bunk. What you're not doing is serving your customer. If your retail customer left you like your employees are leaving you, you'd react. Just think of your employees as customers. How do I serve more? You've already done it. You've already cracked the code if you're still in business. Just do it in this new domain.
Yeah, and that's terrific. And I think one of those areas that you mentioned there, and just that exchange is what's important. It's not, it used to be very much I think of CX, and I'm, of course, I always talk CX. You know that, Mike.
Yeah.
You know, my mentality is there. But when we talk CX, I mean, if we think in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, that brand was controlled. I mean, that message that, you know, what you think about us was pretty much controlled by the media they put out there, which was on commercials, which was, you know, there wasn't this, you know, huge void called social media, which fills it up. And I think we see a little bit of that in employee experience now, because you could go on Glassdoor before you apply for a job and say, is this a good company to work for? So there's these tools out there, and there's people that just like we complain about, you know, a FedEx package that was kicked down the road or something, that people can get on and say, I felt like I was kicked down the road. I was overlooked for this promotion, or things like that.
Correct. Yeah. And so these are it. And Glassdoor, you know, if you're running a company, can be a nightmare if you're not reacting to it. So it's not that you want to pander to Glassdoor feedback, but you want to be cognizant of it, of this is the damage that can be done. And we can kind of all see through that now. So you know, why aren't we doing this now? Can we suggest 3 problems maybe? Like, oh, this sounds good. Okay, steal from CX, bring it over to EX. Okay, so why aren't we doing it today? So can I suggest 3 big challenges that are in our way to execute against this? Okay, challenge number 1, in the same way, it's a systems issue. So as in customer experience, we needed new systems to revolve around the end user, the customer. So in banking, think we had to create home banking in order to let the customer self-serve, check your balances, see your accounts, whatever. We had to put an app in your hand so you could do the service, right? That's a principle of CX. In the same way here, current HR systems, all the HRIS systems are built really for the company to do compliance, payroll, benefits, and they do an incredible job on that. So think Workday, think SAP, think ADP, amazing companies. But we needed new systems to appear. And so that's why companies like Team On Up get a chance to be born, because there is no system that you could give to each employee on staff. If you have 2,000 employees, each person gets these tools. And in that way, you're finally addressing a hidden market in your staff. So it's a systems issue, number 1. Number 2, we have and linking into the systems issue, we have the ability for the end user to drive their work. So you can't do this one without solving the systems issue first, but we're not taking a holistic view at employees. And right now we're seeing maybe 25% of the human being at work right now. And it's mostly skill set kind of inventory based on your job description. So you're an accountant at big company X, you got hired to do accountant things, which I'm an English major, so I actually have no idea what accountants do. But and at that point of entry, you're like, okay, I have these skills. And that's kind of it for most people. And so if you could take a holistic view and invite your employee to say, well, why don't you tell me about you? Why don't you tell me your interests? Why don't you tell me your experiences? Why don't you tell me where you've been? What hard skills you think you have, soft skills? Let me have a conversation with you at scale. And then let me help you develop those skills in a way. And maybe we can double check those to make sure that you're really credible in the way that you think you are, right? So that's 2. We need a system, and then have the end user design it. And then 3, we've got manager issues right now. Corporate America has asked the middle manager to be an ultra individual contributor, haven't we? That person might have 10 or 12 direct reports, and they look like a SME on steroids. And that is what we're asking. But we're also saying, hey, can you kind of keep track of these 10 extra people and be traffic cop? It's an unfair ask. That person doesn't probably want to do it anyway by nature, or they would have gotten promoted by then, either if they wanted to make that. It's not a criticism, it's just the reality. You need that staff, those ultra individual contributors. But we're hoping that the training we would do in a workshop is going to kind of trickle down from that manager. And with employee engagement at 16%, I think we're ready to say it's not working. It's not anybody's fault. It's a systems issue, then an end user issue. And then what we've asked that middle manager to do is in fact not possible. And so you have this kind of compounding, you know, what am I trying to say? Rubbernecking on the highway of corporate America. So 3 big issues I see.
And what you said about the trickle down, I mean, that's, again, tying that back to the customer experience side. I mean, we've gone out there and we've gone out of our way to make sure that the information that we're gathering today is in the hands of the employees on the front line today. Yet at the same time, what you're talking about, I'll be honest, I don't think I've had anything ever more than an annual review usually.
Right.
And suddenly, you're starting to look at it. There's not that real-time feedback. And so you're almost talking about an on-demand type functionality,
Yes.
right?
That each person could control and say, hey, let me go get my own feedback from not just my boss, but peers perhaps, right? So Marcus Buckingham, who's given credit, right, for the Strength Finder stuff and is so smart and so compelling on some of these issues about employee experience. They did a study that showed 60% of manager feedback is actually just a mirror of how that manager is feeling about himself, right? We literally can't do this because we're human. And so, but getting the ability to be self-aware and get feedback loops going, so you can sort of, in our model, DIY your work life, do it yourself. Let me go talk to a peer who's smart about something. Let me go talk to a different leader in the organization and work on my skills in that way with another human being that is live and in front of me. It's just a different way to think about it. HR talks about competencies and functions, and nobody else actually talks like that. It's not that it's bad. I mean, there's expertise there, but people want to grow and expand and develop and be in the game and have a chance to make some mistakes and not get fired for it and then go again and get a bonus for it ultimately. And it's just, we struggle with that in corporate America.
And you mentioned something, not get fired for. I mean, that's something seems like you sort of have that split in the delivery of, you have a group that are just doing what it takes to not get fired.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need those people, they're doing what, but if they're delivering on that 2 to 3 times promise, as you mentioned, that's, sometimes what we expect. But we live in a world nowadays where people are looking at the people around them. They're comparing themselves to their peers that they graduated, their cohorts they graduated with, and saying, well, this person now has this title in front of their name, and how do I get there? And when you're looking at assessing that, it has an impact across the entire organization. As they say, it only takes the one poison pill in the reservoir,
Yes,
to ruin it, essentially.
yes. Oh my gosh, you're so fun. So this is one of my favorite topics, and I think a really hard one for us to be talking now in this world. One, that group that's just trying to not get fired. It is human. Like, it's a global pandemic in particular. Like, I need this job. I've got to put food on the table. Let's just hang in there together. I think we've got to give each other some grace and like, roger that, I got it. I feel the same way each day. Two, is today, again, Tuesday or Thursday? Can anybody remember what day it is in these global pandemic? It's just like monotony every day.
It's Saturday, isn't it?
I know. So here's 2 big things. One, we are trying to create innovation inside of companies, which demands divergent thought, which demands that we try something new. So I'm putting my hands out in this V of it. Innovation is by definition a divergent experience. Corporations are built to converge in budget cycles and the hierarchy. Just think about the pyramid. It converges at the top. And in that, decision rights converge. When it gets any level of serious, hold on a minute, Sparky, I'm going to make that decision for you, right? So this expansion of decision rights, because we don't have these systems, is even a greater struggle when, in particular, I'm like, hey, I don't want to cause any trouble. Don't let me upset the apple cart. I'm just trying to not get fired. That's not everybody, but that is enough. And then 2, what we're struggling with is this wrestling match. And I think we're going to get there. It sure feels to me like in the world, we're in a rebirth process. We're struggling with issues of diversity and equity and inclusion. And how do we get the good out of each person for the benefit of the business? It is happening in real time. But right now, the only thing we're left with is eyeball deep diversity. What I can see of you, what you look like. I look different than you can, then I look different than anybody else. There's only one of me, and that's probably a good thing. But this eyeball deep diversity prevents us from having a conversation about what we value. And in corporations that by definition are built to converge and don't accept divergence for very long because it eventually is just annoying, those talented people then are like, all right, well, nobody's listening. I'm out to go to another marketplace that will accept me for who I am. So can we invite human beings into work and allow them to be their full selves? And hey, bring us your headaches, bring us the good things about you. And together we can create and diverge and then converge on what matters and do great work and serve our customers and make money together. That's a real challenge. And in this world where we're struggling to find the right words, and there's a lot of conversation that is being yelled because there's a lot of passion and anger and hurt. And then there's a lot of conversations not happening because people that look like me are saying, I'm quite sure I'm going to say something wrong and I don't want to get in trouble. So I'm just going to kind of sit here. You know, it's a really interesting place we're in. And we have to have compassion for one another and empathy and start to understand that that means just because I'm trying to understand you does not mean I have to adopt your position. Let me just try to get there with you. And in that is a better idea at work. And in that might be something really innovative. And in that, what engagement looks like, because now we're using our voice and we're talking and we're listening and, you know, working together. Just a real challenge.
Yeah, and you brought up a word that it sounds like, you know, you said innovation, and it sounds like the process you're talking about is how you should really structure innovation, not just personally, but as a company and as an organization, is that bring in all the ideas, and before you shoot them all down, let's make sure that we listen to all of them and say these are, you know, you brought 5, these are the 3 that we can work on and these other 2 we can't. But like you said, diverge before you converge.
Yeah, Ken, I mean, anybody who's been in a big corporate America, worked for that wrong manager that was not a good fit for you. I've done this multiple times. And I'm the person who's just relentlessly, and I didn't know it at first, but like, why do we do it like that? Why do we do it like that? That eventually becomes really tiresome to that middle manager. And that, so the empowerment game we're playing right now, come on, innovate. I'm kind of over that. I'm like, companies, you need to deliver tools that allow people to do this and have access to self-fulfillment, growth, and opportunity in this digital fashion. So we can kind of limit the damage our eyeballs do to us and instead look more at people for the deeper things that matter at companies, which is common ground and shared values and shared outcomes and customer experience and how we treat each other and how we serve each other. That's a harder thing, but we're not getting there without systems to support that movement and that breaking down of silos, or otherwise it's just try harder and it's not working. It's not working.
Now on the screen, I have a little bit of a story, and it's, you know, we talk about, I mean, employees are that front line, and what a terrible name, front line. I mean, because we use that in war, basically. It's like the front line, the sacrificial lambs, like go advance forward, and then, you know, then we'll bring in the tanks. But, you know, when we talk about employees, I mean, they are that component that makes your business run for your customers as well. And whether they, believe it or not, even in accounting, whether they sit in accounting or they're at a register in the store or they're your client success manager, they all have their role. And the story that I have on my screen, it talks about a person who was like told, hey, you're empowered. Do what it takes to make sure it happens. This particular story came out of the travel industry. Employee said, hey, I have a customer here, a guest in our hotel that said, you know, I'm stuck. Is there anything, like, I can't get home? And this is as COVID's breaking out, travel restrictions. The employee did something very simple, found a number, called the local consulate and said, connected the two. The employee got a compliment from the customer. It sounds like, great. This is what it should be like. This is what a service experience should be like. The employee was empowered. The customer really had their needs met in an unexpected way. And then we found out the employee got reprimanded for it. And it seems like there's still that struggle between how do we make sure the experiences across the board are great. And the reprimand basically came across as, well, we can't do that because then everyone will expect it.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And it's sort of the same thing with employees. Like, we can't promote you because then everyone will expect a promotion.
Ken, I'm not going to name names, but I've had 3 calls this week that you're trying to build a relationship and have trust, and these are very human things. And I have to be honest, I have thought them as well as a leader. I had a very blessed opportunity to be the CEO of a 1,700 person company. And those thoughts do cross your mind of like, oh gosh, what if everybody wants to become EVP or CEO? I think the mind bender is you'd be shocked at how many people don't want that.
Yeah.
But this issue, like those companies, it's the worst. We've all suffered on it. Like, oh gosh. How that plays out in companies is, and you just said it, that frontline worker who's trying to go above and beyond. In our business, we have one of our modules, we call it micro mentorship, and you can have teammates get together for trusted conversation. And we facilitate it and make sure it's going to be productive and, do our best to help a good conversation. But you're away from your reporting line and then towards a teammate who's smart on the topic. What you just said is, well, so the companies we talk to, many of them have said, well, okay, that's a cool idea. I get it why people want mentorship, but when are we going to get back and do our actual work? And it kind of hurts my heart. I get it. It just means I've got to do better on articulating the economics of it. And I like to blame me on those instances, but that is the prevailing mindset, of, okay, how I hear this. How long do I have to enable these millennials before they can just do what I did and put in 20 years and climb the corporate ladder and, they'll get to be where I am. That is still a prevailing thought. And again, we're not posting that on LinkedIn anymore, but that culture is seeped into corporate America and is there, whether we want to work hard to ignore it or not, it's there. And so those issues, people want growth, expansion, and alternative promotions so that they can make the jump up. Because the reality is we all sort of know if you want a 25% increase in salary, probably means you're leaving your company. Companies, wait a minute, you want me to jump job bands for you? That would seem reasonable to me, but that's a bridge too far for most companies. So, yeah. But in the meantime, engage your workforce and they will spend their discretionary energy on your mission and your outcomes because they're working on their own skills and development and getting what they want and need, which is a fair exchange of value and a good economic proposition for companies.
Well, and add to it that a fulfilled employee will do more for their customer.
Yes, you're a living example of that. Tim Conaham is a living example of that. That guy's a machine. You can't stop him. That's just who he is. Here's another interesting one I hear related to this, Ken, is, we talk about our products or a new way to engage, and a lot of companies will say, well, I just want to give it to my top 10% of employees. So two things here. One, I'm saying, if that's your mindset, don't actually do anything for any of your employees, because you could fight against that top 10% and they will still be in your top 10%, because that's how you get to be top 10%, right? Just by nature, they can overcome a bunch of stuff. And then your bottom 10%, something's gone wrong in their life or at work, it's a bad fit, something is happening. And we could chase that or realize when I'm looking at those two bookends, I'm ignoring 80% of my workforce. And if I could then figure out, okay, maybe there's 30% more people who are going to hang out with us for 3 to 5 more years, but I just don't know where they are throughout the organization. They could be at the top of the stack. They could be at the bottom of the stack. Who knows where they are? That's the real thing here. And that's another lesson from CX is understand your customer better so you can serve her better. It's the same principle here, a systems approach with leadership philosophy that matters so that you can serve better, and find your rock star so you can have an awesome rock band. You can be Led Zeppelin of companies that are focused on employee engagement.
And you brought up something that I think from the CX perspective, as we talk about measures like NPS, we always talk about the promoters and amplifying them, and we talk about the detractors and how we can do closed loop feedback. And it's one of those areas that we're still learning as well, that we have this big group that can be 60 to 80% of the population called passives in the middle of NPS, and we sort of don't do anything with them. And some of them could be right there on the cusp of greatness, yet at the same time look a lot like those detractors that are ready to leave. And it sounds like you have the same philosophy when it comes to the employees.
100%. Yes. And when we say it out loud, and now, of course, I'm talking about this so much. And people have said to me 2 weeks ago, some guy was like, when you say it out loud like that, I feel dumb. I'm not trying to do that to anybody because that kind of stifles it, but it's like, right, it is an obvious expression of all the agony we've gone through in CX. We can now have a leapfrog moment in EX because the lessons are learned. Oh, okay, I have to revolve around my end user. My end user here is the employee. Okay, I need a new system that they can drive. Okay, give that one. We have all of those now. Our company or others, there are really interesting concepts out there that you can now do this and have the recapture moment. And then also address those passives like you're saying, Ken, but learn from the troublemakers. You know, that's those divergent people who end up being mostly kind of a pain in the neck. Now you can leverage them because what they're railing against is they are divergent. You're asking them to not be true to their nature. Instead, let's embrace you and leverage your uniqueness for the greater good. Really interesting challenge.
Yeah, and sometimes you see it in hirings, especially at the top level, the most senior level. Sometimes they're looking for that CEO that has, you know, we when we look for employees, we say, oh, we want them to have a stable work history. We want them to have 3 years, 5 years here. And then when we look at a CEO, we go, we want the one that has 2 years because we know he went in there, he fixed the problem, and then he was out. And, you know, sometimes it's, you know, we spend too much time on the inventory of skills, I'll call it. And I remember reading a story. There was a job advertised that said you need 4 years of fast API experience. And the person who invented fast API said, well, I invented it and I only have a 1.5 years experience, so I'd like to know who has more. So sometimes we start putting these inventories together, whether it's on a job listing, and it almost discourages people from wanting to be part of your marketplace. And if you're doing that, you're hurting your customer and your employee.
It's crazy town. I've read a ton of job descriptions now for our prospects and clients. And you know, what would be a $50,000 job? You're asking for $800,000 worth of value and skills out of that person. It's crazy town. And so these high risk, high reward moments you're describing, the employee's challenge is, okay, I want to do a new job that challenges me and puts me on my S curve, right? I want to be in over my head. Anyway, the employees that you really are going to change the trajectory of your company. But the hiring manager is mostly saying, have you done this exact job before? Because I need it to work. Because I need my promotion. There's this inherent friction. And the game is always, can I tell you enough about my background that you could trust I extrapolate into this new environment? And then can we stay in touch well enough in a governance model, which is part of what our software does, that I know that we're tracking the true north on our goals? I mean, that's most of corporate America is. How are we doing on our goals? Are we on track? What do you need? If you boil it all down, that is a lot of it. And yet we spend 6 months on strategic planning and it's in PowerPoint and it never, you know, the people 3 levels down from you don't know what EBITDA is. I barely knew what EBITDA was when I got my CEO job. It's just not how people think.
Yeah. And like you said, that 3 months down the road, seeing the PowerPoint, having no context, and you know, I look back at the early years of my career in CX, and that's what it was like. It was like, hey, we had this periodic, you know, we ran the survey. The survey might ran continuously even, but every 3 months they got a report, and there was no context to it. And it sounds like you're looking to overcome that challenge a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's look at one more thing that we were talking about. I mean, it's impossible not to talk about that elephant in the room called COVID, which has certainly changed the workplace. I'm one of those that, believe it or not, that have been working from home for about 20 years. That was always that was. Yeah, it was always on my list. If you're going to have me, that was part of the exchange. If you're going to have me working for your organization, I'm going to be living someplace beautiful where I can look up at the skies and know that I'm home. You know, at the same time, Sagar and AJ, who are joining us on the call here, they are only recently feeling that sort of, oh, I can work from home. And I think, you know, within our organization, it's certainly changed how we're going to take that approach. That we have to be more flexible on things like that. And that's sort of a forced change. but there are still so many other things that, other changes and that haven't been forced. How do we encounter those, and how do we understand them? How do we better measure them, assess them, and say, hey, we know that we need to make this change? Because I would say probably 10% of people would say working from home is important. But I would say after this, probably 80% think working from home at least a couple of days a week would be important. Where are the opportunities that we're missing because we're not listening?
I love it. Great question. And we could do another webinar on the question just asked. I think what's happening in the world, Ken, is that we all had variables we were weighting in our life: compensation, career, growth, opportunity, commute, family life, kids, perhaps, money. I think what's happened in this pandemic, as we've been on lockdown, there's been a shifting of how we're weighting those variables, and people are realizing, geez, I was commuting an hour each way. There was compensation in that. So now I'm more fit, I'm healthier, I'm having dinner with my kids. That's happening. And a lot of leaders I'm talking to, I'm like, listen, you are working hard to ignore that calculus is not running in people's minds. So that in that is this rebirth moment. There's, on the other side of this, we're going to see how that sorts out. On your slide here, Ken, you know what I find interesting? The location, these are all physical locations. And when I look at 4 of these, at least, the shopper in your bottom left, that is now done by somebody, right? I might have ordered my groceries on my phone, and that's actually somebody hired to shop for me. And then robots are going to be doing, and have been doing, a lot of these other tasks. So there's a workforce reskilling element here that we have to consider. And what does this mean for us in society today and ongoing, as we put in massive amounts of capital into these situations? And then 2, as it extrapolates to work, you have to realize location is less relevant. As you just said, work from home, work from the office. It's a work anywhere world. And as you think about that and the skills we all have, you have to also realize what it is not. It's just that we're on Zoom. Although it is amazing, it is just a portal to see someone face to face. And fantastic, we have video in our model too. But work in this world is what CX is: personalized, user-centric. I have to enable self-service. I have to have the consumer drive the bus for me. That's what's matters, so that you can personalize the experience. Once you get your feedback loop going and you get your people analytics going, as in your customer analytics, then you're like, oh, I know how to grow my culture. And you're not guessing. Right now we're guessing mostly about everything at work. And again, with 16% engagement, it's not working. Let's stop guessing. Deliver systems for each employee, address the hidden marketplace in your work, and unlock the wisdom so people will spend their discretionary energy in service of each other and service for your mission for your customers.
That's terrific. And I know we're running up against the clock here. And
stop it. We're going to talk for another hour and a half. Everybody stay here.
Everyone's good with
Open
that, right?
Open the line.
Raise it. Actually, I did want to make sure we put our contact information out there if you want to reach out, ask questions, whatever. But we did, I know we already had a few questions come in. I'll start with the first one that I saw early on. Yes, there will be a recording link sent out. So hopefully you're just enjoying and listening and learning. And if you want to scribble notes, we can do that later. I think AJ had mentioned that in the chat as well. So AJ, were there other questions that we can answer?
Yes, we have a question from Gloria. She's asking, what measures should human resource officers put in place to drive employee experience?
Well, first of all, make sure you measure, because if you're not measuring, you're already missing out on some of the opportunity there, I think. There's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, too often we spend time doing these performance appraisals, and I remember having to do them. At one point I think, like you said, middle manager, 12 to 14 employees, and I'm just sitting there like going, well, here's 2 months of my life down the road as I fill out all these forms, doing it once a year and things like that. And then something wonderful came along called OKRs, which means now instead of doing it for 2 months a year, I do it 1 month every quarter and fill out these OKRs and tell people, this is what you have to do for me, so I feel like you're a valued employee. I think there's got to be a little more continuous dialogue like we do with CX, and I know Mike agrees with me on this one. I mean, it's got to be continuous. You've got to be able to say, I've always been a proponent of, hey, at the end of the day, have a little 5-star. Hey, how was your day? And it's not to say that every day is going to be a good day. There's going to be bad days. I always said, you know, the measure of a good job ultimately is when you have a lot more good days than you have bad days. There's going to be rough days, and so, Mike, what would be your take on, you know, how you should measure and assess?
Great question. So what I would do if I was CHRO, I think there's a great matchup between CFO, which counterintuitively perhaps on employee engagement, that's actually our first stop, is CFO, because the economics of this are so strong. And CFOs usually kill deals like this anyway. So if I was CHRO, I would make a matchup with my CFO peer, my colleague in the first team, because you're both great allocators. CHRO is trying to allocate talent to where it's needed. CFO is trying to allocate the money. And in that is an incredible combination. That is the game in corporate America. If you can allocate talent and opportunity, talent and treasure to opportunity, you win the game. You know, that's it. And so CFO is mission driven, values oriented mostly. CFO is mostly, you know, accounting driven and economics driven, and they're thinking in numbers. Those are the competencies, but you're both allocators. I would work hard to make a matchup to say, hey, here's how I see this. How do you see it? And make that dynamic duo. And then grab a hold of CEO and say, okay, we're going to bust apart this budget cycle to bring new value, because we've got to match our precious resource to the opportunity when our customers need it. That's what I would do.
And when you know, and when we talk about, you know, both within customer experience and employee engagement, we always talk about breaking down the silos. And that's really what you're talking about, is breaking down 2 silos that I would say have nothing in common except that, you know, this mission for the company. But you're right. You're talking someone who's all about numbers, all about accounting, all about, you know, those hard, and then it's human resources. It's about soft. It's about empathy, and bringing those 2 together. And that's why I say I've really enjoyed customer experience, because I got to bring those numbers into that sort of soft space where I can say I'm not just measuring something and turning a lever and saying, okay, it's better, but I'm also making the lives better of the customers.
I'm an English major from the Florida State University, so I think in narrative. It's just part of me, and I've had to work really hard to make good business cases. But you can get it into simple frameworks and make good matchups, because that, if you can't make a good teamwork there, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. AJ, any other questions?
Yes, we have quite a few actually. So Theodros wants to know, what is the best training intervention to bring about CX?
Well, it starts with having the right employees, I would say. You also have to have a service culture, which is important. The intervention that you're doing, I mean, if you're looking for a specific style or approach, you know, you've got to really have a story behind why you're doing what you're doing. And I mean, Mike said he talks in narrative. I talk in stories. I mean, you know, I mentor quite a few people within the QuestionPro organization, and I think the whole time all I do is spend time talking about stories. This is how we overcame a problem. This is how we solved the problem. And so when you're talking about customer experience, even in the employee experience world, it almost usually starts out with, here are the war stories. Here are the things where things went terribly wrong, and here are the ways that we can fix it. But I also always say, if you don't have any sort of measurement in place, and this is true of CX, this is true with EX, this is true with profitability for a company. If you don't have a way to measure it, how do you know if you're changing it? And, you know, so I start there. If you're not even measuring, it might not really benefit you to say, okay, let's put some sort of training in place to make things better. I almost say that somewhat facetiously when it comes to those year-end performance reviews. You didn't have any measurement in place throughout the year. You weren't really measuring, you weren't really assessing. You were just telling people like, here's your goals and these are goals for me, but you never went back and said, oh, well, hey, I have goals for you as well as a company to meet my needs.
That's right.
That's the exchange between customer and company, and that's the same exchange between employee and company. But if you don't have a way to measure it, if you don't have a way to say it's going up or it's going down, you'll never know if what you've done is effective. And a little bit of it's trial and error. Honestly, you can't put something in place for a retailer and say, oh, that will work well for a retail bank. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, Ken, that makes me think of my wife. In 2011, we were out on a family vacation and we snapped a picture. And life was busy and we had little kids and I was enjoying my life and eating out all the time. And I had to double take at the picture. I was like, whoa, that's what I look like? So that measuring of the status quo, it shocked me into reality of, oh boy, I better get on it. I'm not trending well in terms of where I wanted to be fitness-wise. And so it's that picture of where you are today is crucial to kind of shock everybody out of. That's what we're dealing with, whether we want to do it or not,
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes people don't want to measure, and I think you and I had this conversation once. People don't want to measure, whether it's customer experience, whether it's employee experience. They don't want that result because they don't want that shock to the system. Because as a CFO, I'm sitting there going, this is going to cost me, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ken. And I would if somebody hears from HR, I would love insight into what is the right door to open, because I think HR feels the pressure. If employee engagement isn't stellar, it's kind of on me. And I'm saying, no, it's a systems issue. It's the design of corporate America. And together there's an unlock moment that you can really own and champion and be a good partner to the business. But I know there's this unspoken pressure of, oh gosh, is this my fault? Because again, I need my job, global pandemic, and so it's the business case we need. Yeah, and then the glory of 6 months from now, the benefit is yours to own.
Oh yeah, it's terrific. So AJ, I don't see any other new questions come in.
There's two more actually.
Okay.
I think, yeah. So, what are the benefits of having CX and EX reporting under one function?
Wow. Great question. I think maybe one of those people that it reports under is the CFO. They both have that vested interest in making sure that investment is panning out. If your customers are churning or your employees are churning, it's a cost to the company. And I could see some benefit. At the same time, how you manage it would probably have to fall under two different people, because you can't say that it's the same value proposition for customers as it is for employees.
Yeah, I like a little church and state separation, a little checks and balances at work, right? Because then we start to go to our strength and we get tunnel vision. But the incentives, we did a big thing at my old company on process improvement. And we set out, it took us a year to figure this out. So big mistake was we gave everybody, okay, you have to get 10% efficient in your process. Well, nobody knew how to do it, or not enough people knew how to do it. And then we're like, all right, we'll team up with the Six Sigma people. They'll teach you. Well, the incentive to cooperate was not there. So it took us too long to figure out, oh, okay. And part of your compensation is tied to getting to 10% efficiency. And wouldn't you know it, Ken? Magical outcomes appeared. There was great collaboration because you have to have alignment on incentives. And why does this make my life easier? What's in it for me? People are frustrated by that question, but make it the cynical choice to do what is good for the company, and people will do it. Give me a good incentive, give me the skills, resources, decision rights, and a governance model and trust, and get out of the way. Let's go.
It happens. AJ, you said there was one more?
Yes. So we're going to be working remotely for quite some time now. So what are the impacts this will have and how we deliver customer experience and employee experience?
Yeah, I think it's going to be mixed. I think a lot of it depends on the type of customer you're serving and the type of employees you have in your organization. As I mentioned, we're sort of moving to a more work from home, work from anywhere type model within our organization. And I think I like to say that I've served my clients well working remotely as I have for 20 years because I didn't mind being up at all hours of the night, sometimes overseas, to talk to a client about a specific issue because I knew I had that flexibility. At the same time, there's industries where work from home isn't much of a reality. You can't you can't be a cashier from your house, although in some ways, as Mike said, someone could be your shopper and you could order it online and the person can say, okay, I feel like doing a job and, picking up this person's groceries, and you're picking that job up from home. So there will be some changes, and it's, I think ultimately we have this shock moment where we can take a step back and look in how we're delivering our customer experience, how we're delivering on employee engagement, and be able to say, this is an opportunity to change what we're doing. Just like our organization did. I think I'm seeing a lot more call centers. I saw a little bit of this happening pre-pandemic, where call centers were letting people work from home instead of in a big, chain of cubicles. So there were some things moving there anyway, and I think it will accelerate quite a few things. But it's, there's still going to be an impact. Some people are going to like it and some people are going to hate it. Some people will love getting on a call, and I had an experience like this, getting on a call with a rep where suddenly I'm hearing the dog bark in the background and the rep apologizing, because it personalizes the experience. It's now no longer the, I'll call it the enemy agent on the other end of the line from which I'm trying to negotiate my settlement as I feel would be fair. Instead, it's a human who's going through a lot of the things that I'm going through. And I think that will change some of the dynamic in both in customer experience and employee experience.
Ken, I think one thing on this, I love this question. I think we are pretending that work happens in a vacuum. And the whole world is in pandemic, the whole world is in transition, and schools, our local school, is going through its changes of what does opening up look like. And childcare is a variable we are not yet clear on, and school's opening up in 3 weeks. So this household needs to run. So we are like so many people in the world of, oh, what's this look like? I kind of needed my kids to be in school. There's issues like that where leaders have to realize, click out a minute, work is not in a vacuum. So you'd love for people to be in the office, and I hear that pressure. And by the way, the really talented people are saying, I'm not going back because I've realized my work is better, my life is better. So this, hey, I don't want to pressure you, but are you ready to come back to the office? And they're like, maybe, well, I'd love to, but my kid isn't going to be in the 3rd grade, and who's going to take care of her? Those issues are real, and our ability to see each other as a human, and in this world, the world is in transition, work is a part of it, is mission critical. And that will get exacerbated if you don't have systems that allow people to set their own goals, check in with manager, identify themselves as a human, right? Personalize their experience, self-serve, as it were, stealing from CX. It's going to compound. And the thing is, if you're doing 2 stand-ups a day through Zoom, that doesn't make you agile, right? I hear a lot of leaders say, oh, we're agile. And friends, that's just annoying. You need to let people do their work and get on with it, and then be in their life in a way that matters. And so I think it's a really interesting time. And for those pioneers, I'd imagine the correlation between those who crushed CX will also crush EX, and those laggards will suffer the same fate. So it's really a fascinating time to be in the world.
Yeah. And AJ, I saw one more pop in here.
Yes. So we could do this one. This could be the last one. So what replaces employee engagement in mostly automated banking service, and what is its impact on customer experience?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because automation is replacing a lot of things in a lot of places, and I think if we're Mike's an expert on banking service, so maybe I should let him answer that one a little bit more.
Interesting. It's a fascinating question. Could we imagine a day when humans are extinct in the engagement with customers? I don't know. I mean, I think that's a really fun kind of, or not, maybe it's dystopian.
Some introverts just smiled right now.
Yeah. I mean, so what are the robots telling us, or what are my machines telling us about friction points in the customer journey, And are those robots my employees? I think it's a really interesting conversation. But Ken, your premise of this is that they're inextricably intertwined, right? You have to do one with the other or you're not going to get there. So in that question, if AI and machine learning can get adept enough and there is no variability in the human experience, and I'm not screaming at your 1-800 number, just I want operator, maybe, and that's certainly the creep is here, right? Where machines are taking over more of these work, but one fuels the other. You can't think of EX without CX and CX without EX because it's one big feedback loop.
They're tied in. Well, Mike, thank you. It's
Ken,
always wonderful talk.
Come on, you're tremendous. Let's keep going.
So we'll give everyone back their time now that we're at the top of the hour. And I thank you all for joining. And Mike, thank you. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, QuestionPro. See you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.